Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. It's time to give our recommendations on the best 1440p gaming monitors you can buy right now. The last time we took a standalone look at the 1440p market was in July of 2021, and it's fair to say a few things have changed since then in terms of monitor releases and pricing. So this video will serve as an update with fresh information and recommendations for the early parts of 2022. As with our previous best of videos, we tend to talk about and recommend monitors we've personally tested and know to be good, or monitors that are very similar to products we have tested. It's always worth going back and checking out the dedicated monitor reviews we produce for more in-depth thoughts on each product, but just so you know, these recommendations are not sponsored in any way by any company. They're based on our testing results and research. In this video, we'll be going through 5 categories covering medium refresh rates, high refresh rates, larger 32-inch monitors, budget options, and HDR options if there are any. We have a bunch of links in the description where you can check pricing on these products and so on, and in a few of these categories we will be looking into multiple options, so this is going to be quite a detailed video. Let's get started with the best 1440p 144Hz monitor options. The 1440p medium refresh rate category, so around the 144 to 180 Hz range, has often been the most difficult category to make recommendations in because there are so many options available at a wide range of price points. It's also the category that a lot of PC gamers default to, as pricing tends to be pretty reasonable, bang for buck factor is high, and the combination of resolution and refresh rate is great for modern gaming. In the past, I've recommended up to 3 options in this category, but when researching the market in 2022, I think there's one clear standout option that represents the best that 1440p 144Hz monitors offer without going stupid on the price. And it's something we've recommended before and still think is excellent, the MSI Optics MAG274 QRF-QD. The reason why this monitor gets our recommendation in 2022 is simple. It continues to offer excellent performance in its class, either topping charts or coming near to it. And in addition to that, it's quite reasonably priced these days, so to get this top level of performance you don't need to spend hundreds of dollars more than is necessary. The MAG274 QRF-QD is a 27-inch 1440p gaming monitor with a maximum 165Hz refresh rate using IPS technology enhanced with quantum dots, hence the QD in the name. It has a nice flat display and good build quality, in addition to an excellent panel that delivers great gaming performance. I just don't think VA or TN options in this tier are worth considering, given how good the IPS monitors of today are at delivering a balanced experience. Of the 1440p medium refresh monitors we've tested using our latest methodology, all 25 of them, the MAG274 QRF-QD has among the best response behavior we've seen across the entire refresh rate range. Average performance is fast, around 6 milliseconds, but crucially overshoot is kept to a minimum as well. This gives us enough speed to manage the 165Hz refresh rate without introducing artifacts when gaming at lower refresh rates like at 60Hz. One thing we always look for is this sort of single overdrive mode experience. It means you can choose one overdrive setting and use it for all gaming conditions, and the MSI model provides this quite comfortably. The MSI model's competitors like the LG 27GP850 might be similar in raw speed but often have worse overshoot at lower refresh rates. The bouncy is just really nice from the MAG. We're also getting low input lag and a usable backlight strobing mode without annoying defects like red fringing or considerable crosstalk. Gaming in motion looks great. But where the MAG274 QRF-QD separates itself from the pack is that it offers this speed without compromising on color quality. The IPS panel used here has a very wide gamut, among the widest available today, covering almost all of the DCI-P3 and Adobe RGB color spaces. This gives the display excellent versatility for gaming, content creation, and content consumption, especially if you need Adobe RGB coverage, which a lot of gaming monitors don't offer. And the latest firmware update introduces an sRGB mode, so you don't have to worry about oversaturation for everyday SDR content. So this display really ticks all the boxes. Great motion performance, excellent color performance, decent contrast ratio for an IPS, good build quality, and a surprisingly good price of just $400 US. Now this isn't the absolute cheapest monitor you can get with these specs, and we'll cover some of those in the upcoming budget 1440p section, but it's really hard to pass up on this display at this price. It's offering great value. As for some of the other monitors on offer, we did consider the LG 27GP850, which we've recommended in the past, but ultimately don't think it's worth buying in 2022. It's $100 more than the MSI model, and while it has similar response times, it just isn't as good in terms of color quality, lacking the same wide gamut support, and featuring a much worse contrast ratio. We've also recently tested monitors such as the Nixius NX EDG 27X and Razer Raptor 27, which tend to go one of two ways versus the MSI option. The Nixius model is priced about the same, but doesn't perform as well and lacks some features. Or you get into Razer Raptor territory, which has the awful combination of being both a worse monitor in performance and significantly more expensive. So at least for the start of 2022, just the one recommendation in this category from me. If you truly want a high-end 1440p monitor in 2022, the place to be is in the 240Hz market, where high refresh rate gaming at this resolution is very achievable. Having a 240Hz refresh gives you the flexibility to play competitive games like Fortnite, Overwatch and CSGO with very low latencies and very smooth gameplay, while also enjoying single-player titles at a decent resolution and ultra-quality settings, but at a lower refresh rate. So if you choose the right product, you'll end up with something very future-proof as GPU power continues to rise. There's a few ways to go in the 1440p 240Hz plus market, so I'll start with the best outright monitor you can get. Based on my testing, that's the Asus ROG Swift PG279QM. This 27-inch 1440p 240Hz IPS monitor ticks almost every box you would want, and it nails its performance in all areas. It's very fast. On average across the refresh range, it's the fastest 1440p IPS monitor I've tested based on cumulative deviation, which measures the bounce between response times and overshoot. The PG279QM is so well balanced that it has minimal overshoot artifacts at all refresh rates, and benefits from variable overdrive to keep performance the best it can be at all times. It well and truly has a single overdrive mode experience, and I was very impressed with its motion performance overall. Like the MSI model I talked about in the previous section, Asus is also able to deliver a really versatile product, as the PG279QM has outstanding color performance. This is a very wide gamut monitor with great coverage of DCI-P3 and Adobe RGB, plus it has elite factory calibration, including one of the best sRGB modes I've tested. If you just want a monitor that looks excellent and performs to the top of its ability straight out of the box, the PG279QM is the way to go. From a hardware perspective, there's nothing better than what I've tested, but there is a downside: the price. At $900 US, this is a very expensive 1440p monitor in 2022, as we've seen 240Hz pricing steadily fall over the last year or so. If you really want the best, you'll have to pay for it. If you'd rather something a bit more bang for buck while still delivering excellent performance, there's a few ways to go. For those after an IPS monitor that's most similar to the PG279QM, I'd recommend the Acer Predator XB273UGX. It's $250 cheaper than the Asus model, which is quite a substantial saving for essentially the same sort of panel. However, it does lack some of the features and performance the Asus model has. For example, it doesn't have variable overdrive, so response performance isn't as good, and factory calibration isn't as tight or impressive. But if you're not after the absolute best in all areas, then the XB273UGX clearly delivers better bang for buck in my opinion, and it's what I'd be considering for most buyers. I'd choose it over most other IPS alternatives like the Alienware AW2721D and Gigabyte Aorus FI27Q-X, which are either more expensive, worse performing, or both. Another option I'd be strongly considering is the Samsung Odyssey G7. Pricing has recently come down, and I've seen it for as low as $550 US for the 27-inch 1440p 240Hz VA model, which is an excellent deal these days. The main reason to get an Odyssey G7 is that you want speed. This monitor has excellent motion performance, it's faster and slightly clearer than its IPS competitors, with no typical VA issues like dark level smearing. It also has a much higher contrast ratio with deeper blacks, a key selling point these days and crucial if you plan on playing games in a dark room. However, to hit these high levels of performance, there are trade-offs in other areas. The general color experience isn't as good or versatile as you'll get from an IPS monitor. The color gamut isn't as wide, viewing angles are worse, and the aggressive 1000R curvature isn't ideal for content creation. Samsung also has some pretty bad quality control issues surrounding these sorts of monitors, which should be factored in. But it's still a solid product if you get a good one for the pure gamers out there, and I think it is worth considering. All the monitors we've been talking about so far have been 27-inch options, which I feel is the most suited to the 1440p resolution, and based on what we see, is also the most popular category that you guys want to buy. But some people also like to get something a bit larger, such as a 32-inch 1440p monitor, and over the last year or so we've gotten a lot more larger format options than ever before. Like in most categories, there's a few ways to go here depending on how much you want to spend, but to me there's a clear standout option, and that's the Gigabyte M32Q. At just $450 US, there is little reason to get anything else, when the M32Q is going to be providing pretty much everything you'll be after at a highly competitive and often the cheapest price point. There are no areas of standout class-leading performance to the M32Q, but there's also no huge weak points, which leaves the Gigabyte option as a really well-balanced product. At this sort of price point, I don't think you necessarily need the outright fastest panel or the widest color gamut, just something that is capable in all categories. But even with that said, the M32Q still performs very well. Motion performance is in line with most modern IPS gaming panels, especially when looking at cumulative deviation that gives us an idea of the balance between response times and overshoot. Its 170Hz refresh rate is decent, low input lag of course, and Gigabyte complements this with a backlight strobing feature that works in conjunction with adaptive sync. And then for color performance, we're getting all the usual benefits of IPS, a flat panel with excellent viewing angles, a wide but not that wide gamut, and in this case an above average for an IPS contrast ratio. I wouldn't necessarily describe this as an ideal monitor for content creation, but it has a level of versatility that's well suited for playing games and watching videos. At $450, it's very hard to beat as an all-round 32-inch 1440p gaming monitor. Competitors such as the LG 32GP850 are typically more expensive for similar levels of performance, and the monitors that used to dominate this category, 32-inch curved VA models, just don't come close in performance and often have issues with dark level smearing. IPS is typically the way to go in this category these days. But for some buys, you might want the best of the best, and there are certainly options to satisfy that. The Asus ROG Swift PG329Q is a souped up version of the M32Q. Faster response times, better response tuning overall, wider color gamut. The reason why I typically don't recommend it is that it costs $700 versus $450 for the Gigabyte alternative, and it's just not worth that price difference. But if you have to have the best, I guess it's one to consider. There's also some 32-inch 1440p 240Hz monitors to consider, including the emergence of new IPS variants in this class. We've already talked about the Samsung Odyssey G7, and it's available in a 32-inch variant for around $750 US, basically the same as the 27-inch model, just larger, and while not as good value when going for the larger size, it's still quite a capable monitor. And on the IPS front, we have new entrants such as the Gigabyte Aorus FI32Q-X and Acer XB323U GX. We haven't tested this panel yet personally, but reliable reviewers like TFT Central have and think it's good, so that's something to consider. They are very expensive, typically retailing for over $900 US, so you might be better off getting the same refresh rate at 27 inches instead until pricing settles down a bit. Next up, we have the best budget category, and compared to the previous edition of this video, there haven't been too many changes. 1440p gaming monitors have largely bottomed out around $300 in pricing for a decent one for the time being, and there are, as always, heaps of options to consider. But in this video, I'm going to simplify things a bit and provide a main recommendation, plus some alternates in case it's not suitable. The best budget 1440p monitor right now is the Gigabyte M27Q, and this has been the case for over a year now. Typically retailing for just a bit over $300 US, the M27Q offers excellent value and bang for buck in the 1440p category, offering a 170Hz refresh rate, IPS display, and useful feature additions like a KVM switch. Nothing that I've tested since I've reviewed the M27Q has ended up better in terms of value, which is why it's retained the lead in this category. The M27Q offers decent mid-range response time performance, a wide color gamut with an sRGB mode, great ergonomics thanks to a height adjustable stand, fantastic viewing angles, and solid contrast for an IPS. It delivers an excellent mix of gaming performance and color quality at this price point, outperforming many other mid-range displays which are often more expensive. It's hard to go wrong with this display, and the price continues to be aggressive despite ongoing supply chain issues worldwide. The main downside is the use of an IPS panel with a BGR subpixel layout instead of the conventional RGB layout. This has a small effect on text clarity in some use cases, although I've personally found it to only be a minor issue in Windows applications after a run through with the ClearType utility. I'd recommend it regardless of this issue, or alternatively the Gigabyte G27Q might be worth considering at a similar price. Between the M27Q and the MAG274QRF-QD, you have two excellent options at two distinct price points, a cheaper bang for buck option for budget shoppers, and a more premium product that also doesn't break the bank. The MAG274 is the better monitor, it's faster, has a wider color gamut and no subpixel layout issues, but it's not like the M27Q is a bad product in comparison, it's just more value oriented, and I think buyers will be happy with either model. Several other monitors were up for consideration in this category. In the past I've recommended the Dell S2721 DGF as an option, and it's still great value today at $330 US. But for around the same price, I'd prefer the M27Q. Yes, the Dell monitor is a bit faster on average, has a wider color gamut, and a normal RGB subpixel layout. But it has a terrible contrast ratio, it doesn't include an sRGB mode at all, so it's prone to oversaturation, and it lacks the KVM switch. It's a similar story with the LG 27GP83B, which is a slightly better but also more expensive version of the S2721 DGF, and I'd really only consider these two monitors if you wanted something that didn't have the BGR subpixel array. Most monitors that use LG's nano IPS panels just aren't competitive enough with the M27Q these days, and begin approaching the price of the MAG274QRF-QD, which you just get instead because it's better. So right now, it looks like the price floor for 1440p IPS monitors with at least a 144Hz refresh rate is approximately $300. So what are the options below that? Well, it's here that we get into VA monitor territory, and I honestly would not spend any more than $300 on a budget or mid-range VA, as they get smoked in response time performance by the M27Q and better IPS displays. Aside from the Samsung Odyssey G7, the VA panels we have today are simply not competitive at high price tiers where IPS is dominant. But VA does have its place in the market. If you only have $250 to spend, then your options are either a budget curved 1440p 144Hz VA or a 1080p 144Hz IPS. And for a lot of people, the resolution difference makes the 1080p option a no-go. Yes, at this price point, you have to deal with VA's dark level smearing, inferior response times, worse viewing angles, less expansive color gamuts, and the abundance of curved panels. But as an entry-level option, I still think they are reasonably good if you can't afford to get anything at a higher price point. In fact, response time performance is often not too far away from budget IPS monitors. The difference mostly amounts to dark level smearing. You still get better viewing angles than TN monitors, excellent contrast ratios which are great for gaming in dark environments, and decent color quality overall. As for specific display options, most budget VAs use a variation of the same Samsung VA panels, so the difference in performance between each model are going to be small. The Samsung Odyssey G5 and AOC CQ27G2 are two options I'd be looking at, provided you can get them for $260 or less. But as always, I'd recommend assessing what's available in your region, and specifically the price difference between these models and entry-level IPS variants. Previously, in the best 1440p HDR category, there has been nothing to talk about, as pretty much all 1440p monitors on the market are fake HDR products. What this means is that despite many advertising display HDR 600 or 400 certification, 99% of 1440p HDR monitors have only edge-lit local dimming, or no local dimming at all, which produces terrible visual quality for HDR content. Do not be fooled by marketing BS from companies using the display HDR badge to convince you it has good HDR performance, because it likely doesn't. This means the vast majority of HDR monitors on the market should not be thought of as HDR monitors at all, and should only be considered on the basis of their SDR performance. The last thing I'd want is for you to purchase a monitor that claims it can do HDR, see enormous ugly haloing in HDR content, and wonder why you spent all that money. Most of the time, just ignore whatever it says about HDR. But this year there is one monitor that does have the hardware capable of true HDR performance, the AOC Agon AG274QXM. We're yet to review this display as it hasn't launched in Australia yet, but it does pack a 1440p resolution, 170Hz refresh rate, and a mini LED full array local dimming backlight with 576 zones and peak brightness of 1000 nits. Because I haven't reviewed it, I can't recommend it, although other early reviews have been positive. However, It's also the only product that I would even remotely consider in this category, so I think it's worth mentioning. Pricing is set to be less than $900 US, and it's reasonably hard to find across the globe. AOC is still rolling it out region by region. And that does it for today's monitor recommendation video. Lots and lots of options to choose from, covering most of the 1440p categories I hope you are considering at the moment. If you do want to learn more about the monitors we've talked about today, we do have dedicated reviews for most of them that will go into the specifics around performance and features, which are well worth watching. I also have breakdowns for other monitor types on the channel, as well as a general buying guide for gaming monitors as a whole if you're interested. But anyway, that's it for this monitor recommendation video. If you're interested in supporting our independent testing and all the monitors that we check out throughout the year, then please consider supporting us on Patreon and Floatplane. Links to those are in the description below. You'll get access to things like our Discord community, where you can chat about monitors at any time, and ICC profiles that we create for the monitors that we've reviewed. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.